What's up, guys? Welcome to Whiskey. My name is Jeff. This is a channel where I offer my thoughts and opinions on a specific whiskey, and every once in a while throw in other whiskey-related content. Today we're doing a list. I'm going to be going over 5 Sherry Bomb 12-year-olds. Stick around. Alright, so we're going through 12-year-old Sherry Bombs today, which is an extremely specific category because it's not my top 5 12-year-olds, it's not my top 5 sherried whiskeys, it's not even my top 5 sherried 12-year-old whiskeys. This is my top 5 Sherry Bomb 12-year-old whiskeys. And I realize that sounds like an oddly specific and arbitrary set of parameters for a whiskey list, and yup. So yeah, anyway, these aren't standard sherry 12-year-olds. These ones are going all in on the sherry. So if you're a fan of stuff like raisins and Christmas cake and baking spices and cinnamon and dried red fruits, like if you like really deep, dark, rich, intense sherry, this list is for you. Personally, I do like sherried whiskey, but I kind of go through phases. Sometimes I'm more of a purist and I want minimal cask influence in my whiskey. Sometimes I like that nice big hit of sherry. So, I mean, I'm all over the place. I'm open-minded. I'll dabble with anything. I'm promiscuous. Slutty, even. Ooh. But I'll be honest, sherry bombs specifically are definitely not my favorite style of whiskey. So even the top slot on this list is far from being a favorite for me. Usually I appreciate a little bit more restraint in my sherry so it doesn't overwhelm the distillate. That being said, I do think there's a time and a place for sherry bombs. Sometimes they fit the bill perfectly. For me, that time is usually in winter, when it's cold and nippy outside. There's something very warming about those sweet fruits and those warming spices, which is probably why most people turn to sherried whiskeys around Christmas time. Anyway, I'm blabbering. I have a mystery pour here, as usual. It is an absolutely incredible whiskey. It's probably what I would put as number 1 on the list if it made it onto the list. I'll explain why it didn't later on, so make sure you stick around. I'll tell you what that is. And I guess let's not waste time. Let's jump into it. 5 sherry bombs for you sherry lovers out there. In the meantime, if you'll kindly leave a like down below, that'd be greatly appreciated. So we're going to kick things off with an honorable mention here. This one is the Glen Turret 12. This is a very famous one. The brand overall has lost some favor with enthusiasts recently, but we're not going to get into that here. They're still known for their heavily sherried whiskeys, and this is one of them. Our 12-year-old here is very sweet, it's very forward, it's been matured in both Oloroso and PX casks, and I don't love it. I think it's fine, I think it's a pretty average whiskey, but it does have its fans, and it is a very heavily sherried 12-year-old. Sherry bomb even, so I did want to include it on the list as an honorable mention, so there we go. Glen Turret 12. Alright, so now we're going to move into the proper list, and I want to kick things off with probably the most obvious choice for this list, which is the Glen Alecky 12. Of course, I have to include this on the list. This one is probably the most bombiest of sherry bombs on this list. Yeah, this one gives us big, heavy, intense, rich sherry. This one's also PX and Oloroso finished. Be aware there is some variation between the batches, and the quality is not always lined up. But for the most part, especially if you're getting one of the later batches, one of the more recent batches, you're definitely going to be getting some balls to the wall sherry, to put it technically. But yeah, I have had some lesser bottles of this stuff. I've had some better bottles of this stuff. On the whole, I would say that it does offer up some pretty solid quality. It's also very accessible and affordable, and it gives us a big dose of sherry. So that's what puts it at number 5 on the list, Glen Alecky 12. Next up at number 4, we've got what's sure to be the most divisive whiskey on this list, and that's because it's a Dalmore. Now, Dalmore is a bit of a pariah brand among enthusiasts, and I understand the reasons behind it, but I do like some Dalmore expressions. I like this one. No, it's not the standard Dalmore 12. This one is the 12 Sherry Cask Select. This one, once again, is both Oloroso and PX matured. It has a slightly higher ABV than the standard 12-year-old, and I think it's much better than the standard 12-year-old. We have more depth, we have more complexity in here, and it is a darker, richer sherry. Now, this one still does have the Dalmore isms, so it comes in at 43% ABV. It is a colored whiskey. I wish it weren't. Still, we have some excellent flavors in here. This is a really good whiskey, guys. So coming in at number 4, we've got Dalmore 12 Sherry Cask Select. Next up, coming in at number 3, we've got a whiskey that I really hyped up when I first reviewed it back in the day, I guess around 2 years ago now. I gave it too high of a score. I'm a generous scorer now, but even more so back in the day, but still it is a really good whiskey. This one is the Royal Brocklet 12. This one is the entry point for their new and updated range. They turned things around about 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago, and decided to go in a new direction. They decided to go into a craft direction, which of course is a good thing. And they said that from now moving forward, all of their whiskeys are going to be age stated and naturally presented. Obviously, we were all happy to hear that, but what we were unhappy to see and unsurprised to see at the same time was that with this revamp, they decided to premiumize a little bit. So this one is quite expensive for an entry-level 12-year-old. Still really good though. Huge forward sherry. This one is Oloroso sherry finished. So it's not too sweet. We've got some decent complexity. We've got intense flavors here. This one does fly under the radar for a lot of people. Probably something to do with the price. Again, it is expensive for what it is, but it's still a really good whiskey. Coming in at number 3, Royal Brocklet 12. Next up at number 2, we've got a very famous whiskey. This one is the Dower Caledonia 12-year-old. This one is famous for not only having that big sherry, but it's also got that Dower kind of dirty, funky side to it, which surprisingly is a good match for the heavy dose of Oloroso sherry we're getting here. Dower, of course, is pretty much always craft presented. This is a really characterful whiskey, guys. Again, we have some funk in here. For me, it hits kind of like a lactic funk. This one is going to be probably the most challenging whiskey on this list because sherry is usually very sweet and approachable and friendly, but not this one. This one I would describe as a dirty oddball, which ironically is the nickname the locals gave me on my last trip to Thailand. Anyway, point is, this whiskey is not for beginners, but it is fantastic. Our sherry here is large and in charge, but it doesn't overwhelm the very characterful distillate underneath. Really cool stuff. Coming in at number 2, Dower Caledonia. Coming in at number 1, we've got a whiskey that I reviewed quite recently. I did enjoy it. Similar to the Dower, this one does have kind of a dirty, funky appeal to it. It's not quite as funky, it's not quite as lactic as the Caledonia, but it definitely has that dirty, craft, old school sherry vibe to it. This one is the Glen Turret 12. This one is part of the core range, but it comes out every year. It's an annual release, so we do get some variety between the batches. I've only ever had the 2021, and it is really good. It's challenging though. It's very dry, it's not too sweet. Again, this is one for enthusiasts. But if you're up for a challenge and my description sounds good to you, this is absolutely one to check out. It is an excellent whiskey and it comes in at number 1, Glen Turret 12. Okay, that was it. That was the list. That was my list. Of course, I do want to hear from you guys. I'm sure it's incomplete. I'm sure some bottles got left out. What do you think deserved a mention here? And remember, we're not just talking about sherried whiskeys. We're talking about sherried bomb. We're talking about next level sherried stuff with an age statement. So we're getting pretty specific. Anyway, moving on. For those of you who stuck around to find out what my mystery pour is, I've got Bunnahabhain 12 Cask Strength. Now, this is easily the best whiskey I've mentioned in this video, but it's also not one I wanted to include on the proper list because while it is very sherry forward, I wouldn't call it a sherry bomb. I think this one strikes a better balance between cask and distillate. I think pretty much everything else on the list was very cask driven. This is an incredible whiskey, and I know there's a lot of you out there that want to see this one reviewed. Trust me, I will get around to it. In the meantime, here's a bit of a spoiler for you. I love it, and the review will be very flattering. And I guess that's it for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to help support the channel, I do have the Patreon. Otherwise, you can like, comment, subscribe. Goes a long way. Tell me your thoughts down below. And I guess we'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.